The words cut through the sterile air of the Walter Reed Medical Center's trauma unit like a scalpel through flesh. Another reservist playing soldier. Probably spent her whole deployment filing paperwork in an air-conditioned office. Dr. Jonathan Pierce didn't whisper. He never did. The renowned trauma surgeon from Massachusetts General, brought in as a holiday consultant, wanted his opinion heard. His credentials from Harvard Medical School hung around him like armor, and he wielded them with the precision of a weapon. The night shift personnel, exhausted nurses, overworked physician assistants, and bleary-eyed residents, offered weak, uncomfortable smiles. They were too depleted by the unexpected influx of patients from a multi-vehicle pileup on the ice-slicked beltway to challenge him. They saw what Dr. Pierce wanted them to see, a woman in standard blue scrubs, her dark hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, a temporary hire covering the holiday staffing gaps. The woman's name tag read simply, Harper, J. She offered no response to Pierce's dismissive assessment. Her expression remained utterly neutral, a mask of professional detachment that revealed nothing. She didn't bristle, didn't defend herself, didn't even glance in his direction. Her silence was absolute, a void that swallowed his insults without acknowledgement. Instead, Harper's attention remained fixed on her task. She was organizing a supply cart with a level of precision that bordered on obsessive. Each piece of equipment was placed with deliberate intent. Trauma shears positioned at exact angles for instant access. For catheters arranged by gauge size in perfect rows. She took a roll of chest seals and performed a small, almost invisible modification, using a marker to add tactile orientation dots that would allow them to be positioned correctly even in complete darkness or by touch alone. It was a special operations medic's trick. A ghost of muscle memory from a world most people couldn't imagine. But oh! And this chaotic Christmas Eve, with the trauma bay humming with activity and Dr. Pierce's voice dominating every conversation, no one noticed. They saw a quiet woman doing menial tasks, and their assumptions filled in the rest. Major General Patricia Vega, the hospital's commander, wasn't on site yet. She was fighting her way through the blizzard, drawn by reports of the massive casualty event and an instinct honed over 3 decades of military medicine. She hadn't seen Harper yet, hadn't witnessed the quiet competence that radiated from the unassuming woman like heat from banked coals. But she would. And when she did, the entire night would pivot on that recognition. Dr. Pierce continued his performance throughout the early evening. He was a surgeon who operated on an audience as much as on patients. Every suture was accompanied by commentary. Every diagnosis was delivered with theatrical flair. He peppered his commands with condescending asides directed at Harper. "Nurse Harper, hand me the number 15 blade. That's the one with the slightly larger cutting edge. I'm sure they covered that in your weekend certification course." Each barb was met with the same unnerving calm. Harper would retrieve the requested item, place it in his hand with a quiet, "Yes, doctor," and return to her methodical work. Her lack of reaction seemed to infuriate Pierce more than any argument could have. It was like performing to an empty theater. The absence of response made his entire act feel hollow. The other staff members began to notice patterns. They noticed that Harper's work area was immaculate, organized with a system that made everything instantly accessible. They noticed that when a patient's vitals began to drift, Harper was already moving before the monitor alarmed, her intervention subtle but effective. They noticed her posture, ramrod straight, shoulders squared, weight balanced, a bearing that spoke of discipline so deeply ingrained it had become her default state. She was an island of calm in their ocean of controlled chaos. The blizzard outside intensified, wind howling like a living thing against the reinforced windows. Inside, Dr. Pierce basked in his perceived superiority, mistaking Harper's silence for submission, her competence for mere adequacy. He was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his career. For more stories where silent professionals prove their worth and quiet competence demolishes loud arrogance, subscribe to The Final Watch. Now, back to our story. The shift began with a sound, the pneumatic hiss of the trauma bay doors being forced open against the wind. 2 army medics burst through, their uniforms crusted with ice, their faces etched with exhaustion and urgency. Between them, they wrestled a litter carrying a figure in tattered combat gear. The patient was a geography of violence, blood, burns, and the unmistakable damage of an IED blast. "Delta operator," one medic shouted, his voice ragged. "Training accident at the nearby range. Explosive malfunction. Multiple penetrating injuries, possible internal bleeding, and severe hypothermia. We lost comms, had to navigate by dead reckoning through the storm." At that precise moment, as if the universe itself were testing them, the hospital's electrical system made a sound no hospital should ever make, a deep, resonating groan followed by a series of explosive pops. The world went black. The backup generators kicked in after 3 eternal seconds, but they were struggling. The overhead lights flickered to half-strength, casting long, sinister shadows across the trauma bay. Critical monitoring systems remained dark. The digital infrastructure they depended on was gone. Dr. Pierce froze mid-stride, his usual commanding presence evaporating in the darkness. "I need full power. Someone get engineering up here. How am I supposed to work like this?" His voice had climbed an octave, tinged with panic he couldn't quite conceal. The staff scrambled, their movements uncertain and clumsy in the dim light. Training that worked perfectly under bright lights and functioning equipment suddenly seemed inadequate. Harper did not scramble. The moment the lights failed, her body language shifted subtly but completely. In the darkness, she moved with fluid purpose toward a small locker at the room's periphery. From it, she extracted a compact tactical bag. Within seconds, she had strapped on a headlamp, military grade, the beam cutting through the gloom with surgical precision. She was at the patient's side before Pierce had finished his first panicked command. Her hands moved over the soldier's body in a pattern that was clearly rehearsed 1,000 times. Thready pulse, respiration compromised, suspected hemothorax right side, extensive fragmentation wounds, core temperature critical. The words were delivered in a low, level tone that somehow carried perfect authority. Pierce finally reached the litter, trying to reassert control. "I'll take it from here. Someone get me vitals." But his tools had abandoned him. The electronic monitors were dead. The automated systems he relied on were useless plastic shells. Harper's fingers were already and the patient's carotid artery, her eyes on a simple analog watch that glowed faintly in the darkness. Pulse 130 and climbing, respiration 8 and shallow. "He's shocky. We need 2 large bore IVs, blood products, and we need to address the chest wound immediately." For the first time that night, the other staff members looked past Dr. Pierce. They turned toward Harper. The soldier convulsed, a wet, rattling sound coming from his chest. Blood frothed at his lips, the telltale sign of a tension pneumothorax. Air was filling his chest cavity, collapsing his lung and crushing his heart. Without immediate intervention, he would die in minutes. "Chest decompression, now." Pierce barked, fumbling through the shadowy supply cart. "Where's the thoracostomy kit?" A resident tried to help, but in the darkness and chaos, the pre-packaged sterile kit was nowhere to be found. The system had failed them. Pierce's hands shook as he searched. His confidence, built on perfect conditions and predictable scenarios, crumbled. He was a maestro whose orchestra had vanished, a pilot whose instruments had gone dark. He looked at the dying soldier, then at his staff, and for a terrible moment, he had nothing, no procedure, no protocol, no answer. In that moment of paralysis, Harper moved. She didn't ask permission. She didn't announce her intentions. She simply acted. Her eyes scanned the immediate area with the focus of a predator. On a nearby tray, she spotted a 10 cubic centimeters glass syringe, still in its sterile packaging. In one smooth motion, she grabbed it and a pair of trauma shears. What she did next would be seared into every witness's memory forever. She used the shears to cut away the packaging, then held the glass syringe firmly. With a controlled, precise strike against the metal bed rail, she shattered the plunger end, leaving herself with a hollow glass tube with a clean, sharp edge. Dr. Pierce stared, his face a mask of horror. "That's not sterile. You'll give him an infection. What the hell do you think you're?" Harper ignored him completely. Her left hand palpated the soldier's chest, finding the second intercostal space with the certainty of someone who had done this in far worse conditions than a dim hospital room. She had done this in darkness so complete it swallowed sound. She had done this under enemy fire, with hands slick with blood and the screams of the dying in her ears. Holding the improvised device with impossible steadiness, she paused for a fraction of a second, a final check of position and angle. Then she drove the sharp glass edge into the soldier's chest. There was a soft puncture, and then a loud, sustained hiss as trapped air escaped. The soldier's body relaxed as the crushing pressure released. The battery backup monitor, flickering to life on a crash cart, showed his oxygen saturation beginning to climb. The silence that followed was absolute. Everyone stared. They stared at Harper. They stared at the glass tube protruding from the soldier's chest. They stared at Dr. Pierce, whose face had gone from pale to gray. That's impossible," Pierce whispered. Into the silence strode a figure of unquestionable authority. Major General Patricia Vega had arrived. She was a compact woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had witnessed the evolution of combat medicine from the sands of the First Gulf War to the mountains of Afghanistan. She had taken the stairs when the elevators failed, her stride purposeful and unhurried despite the crisis. "Permission granted, General," Harper replied quietly. "He's stable for transport to OR. He'll need a formal tube thoracostomy and a full surgical exploration, but the immediate crisis is resolved." General Vega nodded, then turned to face the assembled staff. Her eyes swept over them like a searchlight, finally settling on Dr. Pierce with the weight of judgment. "For those of you," she began, her voice low and dangerous, "who operate on assumptions rather than facts, allow me to provide essential context." She paused, letting the silence build. "This is not a temporary nurse. This is Chief Warrant Officer Harper. United States Army. Her last assignment was as the senior medical advisor to the 75th Ranger Regiment's Regimental Reconnaissance Company. For the civilians in the room, that means she provided medical support to some of the most elite soldiers in the world, in some of the most hostile environments on Earth." Another pause. The gasps were audible. "The procedure you just witnessed," General Vega continued, stepping closer to Pierce, "is formally known as the Harper Protocol in Special Operations medical literature. She developed it during a mass casualty event in Somalia when her team was overrun and lost all their equipment. She saved 6 lives that day using nothing but improvised materials. It is now standard training for all special operations medics and is featured prominently in the Tactical Combat Casualty Care Handbook." She let that sink in, then delivered the final blow. "Chief Warrant Officer Harper has more trauma experience in her first year of service than you have accumulated in your entire career, Dr. Pierce. She has operated in conditions you cannot imagine with resources you would consider inadequate. She has earned every single commendation in her file through blood, sweat, and unshakable competence." General Vega's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to strain to hear. "You are not qualified to question her methods. You are barely qualified to observe them. I suggest you spend less time on your opinions and more time learning from the professionals in this room who have actually proven themselves under fire." The humiliation was complete. Public. Surgical in its precision. Dr. Jonathan Pierce stood in the flickering light, his arrogance dismantled, his assumptions exposed as dangerous ignorance. The story of what happened in Trauma Bay 4 on Christmas Eve spread through Walter Reed like wildfire. By morning, it had reached Fort Bragg, Camp Lejeune, and every military medical facility in the theater. They called it the Christmas miracle on the Beltway. The improvised chest tube, which Harper had carefully removed once proper equipment was available, was not discarded. General Vega had it sterilized and encased in clear acrylic. She mounted it on a plaque with a simple inscription. Christmas Eve, Walter Reed Medical Center. Competence requires no approval. Excellence requires no announcement. It was placed on the wall outside Trauma Bay 4, which the staff immediately began calling Harper's Bay. The effect on Dr. Pierce was transformative. The public humiliation shattered his ego completely, but from the wreckage, something better emerged. The next morning, he found Harper in the break room, reading a worn paperback while monitoring the recovering Delta operator through the observation window. Pierce stood in the doorway, a man stripped of all pretense, looking smaller and older than he had the day before. "Chief Warrant Officer Harper," he said quietly. She looked up, her expression neutral, waiting. "There's no apology that can undo what I said and how I acted," Pierce began, his voice thick with genuine remorse. "My ignorance was profound. My disrespect was inexcusable." He paused, struggling. "I came to ask if you would teach me. Not the procedure, I can read the manual I should have already studied. But the mindset. The ability to see solutions instead of obstacles. To act instead of panic." Harper closed her book, studying him for a long moment. She saw not the arrogant surgeon from yesterday, but a student who had finally recognized the limits of his knowledge. She saw an opportunity not for revenge, but for mentorship. A small smile touched her lips. "Pull up a chair, doctor," she said quietly. "Let's talk about how to think under pressure." The change in Dr. Pierce became legendary. He transformed from a loud, domineering presence into a thoughtful, humble leader. He began every shift by asking his team, nurses, techs, residents, what they had observed, what they had learned, what they thought. His training sessions with Harper became regular events during her remaining weeks at Walter Reed. She taught him through scenarios and questions, forcing him to think beyond protocols and perfect conditions. "Your patient needs a surgical airway. You have a ballpoint pen and a pocket knife. What do you do?" She was retraining his brain, teaching him the fundamental truth of combat medicine: the best tool is the one you have, and the best medic is the one who can adapt. He absorbed every lesson with desperate humility, his former arrogance replaced by profound respect. The story spread beyond the hospital. A young Army medic who witnessed the event wrote a detailed account for his instructor at the Army Medical Department Center and School. The instructor, a veteran sergeant major, read it twice, then made it required reading for every incoming class. The Delta operator Harper saved, Master Sergeant David Chen, made a full recovery. He requested and received assignment as Walter Reed's Wounded Warrior Liaison, dedicating himself to helping other service members navigate recovery. He stood often by the plaque outside Harper's Bay, telling the story to patients and visitors, his voice filled with reverence that never faded. Harper herself deflected all recognition. When General Vega attempted to arrange a formal award ceremony, she politely declined. "I did my job, General. That's all." When her temporary assignment ended, she left as quietly as she had arrived. No fanfare, no ceremony. One morning, she was simply gone. But she left behind a permanent change in the culture of the hospital, a legacy of quiet competence that became the institution's gold standard. 1 year later, on another Christmas Eve, Dr. Jonathan Pierce stood before a group of new residents in front of Trauma Bay 4. He was a different man. The sharp edges had been smoothed away, replaced by wisdom earned through humiliation and transformation. "Before you treat a single patient in this facility," he began, pointing to the plaque, "you need to understand this story." He told them everything. He didn't spare himself, detailing his arrogance, his ignorance, his failure. He told them about the quiet temporary nurse he had mocked, and how she saved a man's life while he stood paralyzed. "I judged her by her appearance, her quiet demeanor, her temporary status, Pierce said, meeting each resident's eyes. I revealed that I was the least qualified person in that room. Competence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply performs, regardless of the conditions. Your job isn't just to learn medicine. Your job is to recognize competence wherever you find it, and to have the humility to learn from it, regardless of rank, title, or appearance. It was the new gospel of Walter Reed's trauma unit, a founding myth that shaped every doctor, nurse, and medic who walked its halls. Master Sergeant Chen walked by, giving Dr. Pierce a respectful nod. He was heading to deliver presents to the pediatric ward, a living testament to the legacy of that Christmas Eve. He offed and wondered where Chief Warrant Officer Harper was, hoping she was safe, hoping she had found peace. The answer was she was where she was always needed, in some remote corner of the world. In another moment of chaos, a calm, quiet woman with steady hands was doing her job, saving a life, expecting no thanks, leaving behind only the quiet echo of her competence. Legacy is not carved in stone or printed on certificates. It is not found in the noise of self-promotion or the fleeting glow of public recognition. Real legacy is quieter, more profound. It is the silent current of influence that flows from one person to another, shaping character, elevating standards, inspiring excellence. The story of Chief Warrant Officer Harper became such a legacy. She left behind no statues, no named buildings. Her official file remained classified, a collection of redacted missions and understated commendations. But her true legacy was written into the DNA of the hospital she briefly served. It lived in the transformation of Dr. Pierce, who became a wise and respected mentor. It lived in the steady hands of nurses and medics who faced every crisis with calmer, more focused resolve. It lived in the dedicated work of Master Sergeant Chen, who paid her gift forward every day. Legacy is not an inheritance you leave behind. It is a standard that moves forward. It is the quiet competence that echoes in the actions of those you taught. It is the moral clarity that guides a team long after you've gone. Harper never sought to be a legend. She sought only to be competent, to do her duty to the absolute best of her ability, regardless of circumstances. In doing so, she became a symbol of the quiet professional, a testament to the truth that worth is proven in action, not opinion. Her story serves as a reminder that respect is not demanded but earned through discipline, precision, and unwavering commitment to excellence. In a world filled with noise, her silence was the most powerful statement of all, a quiet beacon that continues to guide those who witnessed its light. It proves that the deepest impacts are often made by those who make the softest footsteps, their greatness measured not in accolades, but in lives saved and standards set. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption, where professional skill defines worth, and where silent warriors prove their valor, subscribe to The Final Watch.